Sorry about that. So I'll just kind of let you look at these slides briefly again. List of assortment sort of things that would be classified as severe weather. And I mentioned that things like wildfires might be added to the list. Especially, glad you said something, because these are all cool animations and I wouldn't want you to miss them. So I'm going to talk about these 4 different types of weather that are related to low pressure systems that affect us in this country. Thunderstorms, cumulonimbus clouds, creating an unstable environment, and then this graphic shows the 3 different stages of the thunderstorm. Cumulus stage, mature stage, and dissipation stage, and I'll just give you a moment to read through the descriptions there. Begins with warm air rising, and as it reaches colder temperatures at high altitudes up to 40,000 feet, the moisture condenses, first becoming clouds and then condensing into liquid raindrops. The downdraft of wind and precipitation almost creates kind of a vacuum as the water falls. It collides with other raindrops, as I mentioned, and creates larger amounts of precipitation. But as the surface temperatures cool and kind of equalize the temperatures, then the storm gradually dissipates. So, talked about the difference in the charges created by the rising updraft and the falling downdraft in the middle of the cloud, and eventually that charge discharges, it sparks and creates a bolt of lightning. And so this is the ominous cumulonimbus cloud I talked about. And then I found this image and I thought it was pretty cool. Someone was a very fortunate photographer. So bolt of lightning, I can't even imagine what 30,000 degrees would be like, but I guess people that have been struck by lightning can describe it. But what happens is as that lightning discharges, as it strikes, there's almost like a vacuum. The air around it expands and then contracts quickly to fill that void, and that the movement of the air to fill that vacuum is what creates kind of a sonic boom. The air moves so fast it breaks the sound barrier, and that's what creates the sound of thunder. So I'm happy to pause between each kind of weather type and see if anybody has any questions or comments. So tornadoes arise from the most violent thunderstorms and are considered to be even more dangerous than basic thunderstorms themselves, with the cyclone-like swirling of the wind that moves in a narrow path across the ground, causing with such force of that wind, creating destruction just along that path and kind of a narrow swath that it passes along the ground. So this rotating column of air extends down from cumulonimbus clouds, and the center has a low pressure that causes air to rush in and spin around that center vortex. And I guess it says it spirals upward until it merges with the parent thunderstorm. And I guess we've probably seen video images where it looks like it's starting low and kind of funnels up towards the cloud. Uh, I'll mention it with hurricanes, but I wonder if
Dr. Ray, he won't eat unless you're here. Oh, really?
hello, somebody's got their microphone on.
Crow doing weather things.
So whoever's got their microphone on with background noise, if you'd be kind enough to mute. Anyway,
Lots of ribs from a great rib place. We started the clock. I started
It's Lisa Kerr. I'll call her on her phone.
for just a minute.
there we go. I've got her muted.
Okay.
Okay, so what I was going to say is I wonder if, like hurricanes, if in the northern hemisphere, tornadoes always spin in a counterclockwise direction. This one almost looks like it's spinning clockwise, but I know that in the southern hemisphere, things spiral the opposite direction as the northern hemisphere. So if anybody knows the answer to that, it'd just be an interesting factoid. Tornadoes, like lots of things, have a classification system. The one that's used for tornadoes is called the Fujita intensity scale, and I'm not sure what makes it enhanced, but we see them on the news ranking tornadoes as an EF 1, 2, 3, and that the EF is enhanced Fujita. So that's what they're talking about, and this classification is based on the speed of the wind, the path of destruction, and the duration of the tornado. Ranges from 40 to 72 miles per hour in EF0 up to over 300 miles per hour for the most severe. However, 85% of the tornadoes that we experience in this country, probably anywhere, are in the lower range, EF0 or EF1. And I saw that a hand went up.
Yeah, Bob, is this what happened in Manzanita? I mean,
well, I'm going to talk about that.
Oh, okay. I'll wait. Sorry.
That's okay. So in this country, a vast majority of the tornadoes occur kind of in the center of the country, from Texas up to Illinois in an area called Tornado Alley. 75% of all of our tornadoes are in that region. And this talks about the EF 3, 4, and 5 tornadoes. So I think that's quite violent ones. And in, I think also a majority of tornadoes occur in North America, the global tornadoes. So you can see areas where tornadoes have been recorded, and almost all of North America is covered, with just small areas of other places. So, but we think of tornadoes mostly in the Midwest and the South, but it's not impossible to happen here. And a lot of us remember the tornado that hit Manzanita in October of 2016. It was described as an extratropical cyclone that came from a storm in the central Pacific that moved this direction, and it created a localized thunderstorm along the northeast part of the Pacific, or our Pacific Northwest coast. It was an EF2 classified tornado that first touched down at 8:18 in the morning. Actually, as I recall, it began as a waterspout, meaning it originated over the ocean, not over land. And when it reaches land, then it changes names to a tornado. Traveled right through the center downtown area of Manzanita. 128 homes were damaged. and a third of the city's trees were knocked down in just 2 minutes time. So that's pretty impressive. I read that just one home was irreversibly damaged and needed to be leveled and rebuilt. The rest were repairable. Fortunately, no injuries or deaths, but at least $1 million in damages. And I don't remember hearing about this on the news, but another tornado at about 9 a.m. happened that day down in Oceanside. However, there was no damage. And this is a video that someone on the Overlook got.
Oh, wow, did you see that? Dude, that's a blue. Dude, that's a straight up tornado. Oh my gosh, dude. I thought Freeze was going over. Look at that. Whoa! I hope Ruben's not there. Dude, look at that.
I don't know if you can hear the
twister.
The sound, but it's pretty entertaining.
Dude, that's a blue. Dude, that's a straight up tornado. Oh my gosh, dude. I thought Freeze was going.
So, anybody have any comments, recollections about the Manzanita tornado or anything about tornadoes in general?
Bob,
Yes, sir.
so on this break between the weather of Cannon Beach, Arch Cape versus Manzanita, is that true or just a wives' tale?
You know, I certainly, in the time I've been here, I've certainly seen many times where there's a noticeable change. We sometimes refer to Manzanita as a banana belt because you can go through the tunnel and be down there and it's sunny and nice, and you come north and come out the tunnel and it's gray and raining. And that's, I think a lot of us have had that experience numerous times. So I think that Neahkani Mountain, the point there actually, just like mountains do, probably acts as a smaller weather break and causes the change. Anybody else want to comment on that?
This is Lila, and we went to the after action report that they had in Manzanita. And one of the things that struck me is how people were monitoring the tornado on the ocean before it came to shore. And I got the impression that they were doing that proactively, not just, oh, look what we saw. And I don't know if that's true or not, or if we have any kind of monitoring system like that. And the other thing is, Manzanita has 35 more days of sunshine than Cannon Beach.
That's an interesting fact. So as far as the monitoring, I did read in Wikipedia, the Wikipedia entry for the Manzanita tornado, that the National Weather Service did issue like a watch for that area. They said that the weather was conducive to that kind of an event and to be prepared. So just a little bit about tropical storms and hurricanes. I think we've all experienced pretty significant windstorms along here, so that are comparable to hurricanes that they see in the Gulf and on the East Coast. So even though I'm mostly going to be talking about what I read about hurricanes, it really is all connected. And I used to think that hurricanes, they called them hurricanes when they arose in the Atlantic, but apparently they are still hurricanes in the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean. So they would be called hurricanes if they come up the west coast of our country. When they get to the east part of the Pacific, they are called typhoons. And south of the equator, it's all kind of the same type of thing, but they're called tropical cyclones. what we see in this country, primarily the hurricanes that come from the east originate over Africa and make their way across the Atlantic, affecting the Caribbean, the Gulf, the countries along the Gulf, Central America, and the United States. They start as low pressure systems over Africa, and then the trade winds blow them out over the warm water of the Atlantic, and those pressure differences and temperature differences are what lead to the building of the storm. So the let's see, water over the Atlantic, warm with lots of moisture in it, and as the so it really starts kind of like a thunderstorm as well with the cumulonimbus system, but the downdrafts cause it to build, and it doesn't kind of dissipate because of the cooling below, so that warm moist air continues to fuel the system, and they grow and grow as they move across the warm waters of the Atlantic. So just like we worry about like the storm surge, whether it's a king tide or whether we're watching for tsunamis, even like the Tonga origin tsunami that we just saw, the storm surge is different than just typical wave, because it kind of keeps pushing in. The tide is higher and it continues to push in. The storm surge is considered the most dangerous part of the hurricane. The mound of ocean water is pushed on shore and continues to push in. Here's a video of a storm surge that I found that I thought was pretty impressive. I believe this is from Hurricane Sandy. So I think a lot of us remember the storm we had here in 2007. It's been called by meteorologists the Great Coastal Gale. And actually kind of in the left lower quadrant, you can see some sort of swirling of the clouds there that look reminiscent of the start of a hurricane. But what made this different than what I think of as typical hurricanes is that it was 3 storms, boom, 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 one right after the other. So it was like, usually we hear about hurricanes passing over a particular place, hitting the shore and passing over within maybe 8 hours, and then it's done and behind them. This basically was like hurricane force winds that lasted almost constantly for three consecutive days. It affected from southern Oregon all the way up to British Columbia. The first 3 days of December 2007 was created by the remnants of 2 different typhoons in the Central Pacific, and then carried by what they call the Pineapple Express to our area. The highest winds were recorded at Holy Cross, Washington, 137 miles per hour. I'm sure along our coast we topped 100 miles per hour with some of the gusts. And what complicated it is the first storm had really frigid temperatures, and so there was a lot of precipitation. In parts of Washington, they got over a foot of snow. The second storm right afterwards also had cold temperatures and dumped more snow, but during that storm there was a sudden rapid rise in the temperatures, which led to a rapid melt of the snow and widespread flooding. The third storm had the highest winds, and as I mentioned, a really long duration of winds. Over 110,000 customers lost electricity for many days. I think Cannon Beach was on average about 5 days. There were places in town that were a week. I remember we were actually in Portland at this storm, and Highway 26 was completely blocked by over 300 trees that had been blown down across the highway. And so we couldn't get out here to see things and participate in the cleanup until, I remember it was a Wednesday. I think it was probably the 4th or 5th of December. The image on the right is Vernonia, which had such severe flooding that they were cut off, and there were actually some helicopter rescues in Vernonia. During the storm between Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, there were at least 18 people that were killed, and in today's dollars, it would be about $1.6 billion of damage. Jonathan, I know you emailed that you have interest and experience in weather, and you've been in some pretty severe high wind areas. So if you'd like to share anything with us, tell us about your experience. This would be a good time to talk about that.
Okay, well, I spent much of my young adult life working at a mountaintop research station. And our claim to fame was it was the home of the world's worst weather. We had the record for the highest wind ever observed by man. There have been, which was 231 miles an hour. There have been higher winds, but they've been measured remotely or automated stations. So we still have the record for the highest wind ever observed by man. And it has been my experience that people overestimate the wind. I mean, like a 30-mile-an-hour wind makes it very difficult to walk, and most people will think it's maybe a 60-mile-an-hour wind. So people tend to overestimate it. I have actually been out in 130 miles an hour, and you can't even crawl. Actually got locked out. The weather station was located in the Mount Washington State Park building at the far end of it, and the entrance is at the other end. And we had gone out to just observe the wind. I was out there with one of the interns, and I said to her, "Don't let the door slam behind you," and it slammed behind her and locked. And so there's nobody that could hear us from that side of the building. So I had to go up over the observation deck. It's about 200 feet directly into the wind, and try to make it to the other end of the building where I could bang on the door and let us in. It took me 2 attempts. The first attempt, I just couldn't do it. I said it's about 130 and couldn't even crawl, just flat. And my body was acting like an airfoil. And so I couldn't get any traction, just being flat as I could get. And second time, I finally found a cable that ran to one of our projects. And I was able to hold onto the cable and drag myself across. And eventually somebody came to the door after I wailed on it for quite a while. And I was able to go out and let her back in. So yeah, I got to experience quite a bit. And let's see, I also worked at the well, it's the coldest place on earth. Actually, the record was held by the Vostok station, a Russian station nearby. But where I worked, our record cold was 127 below zero. That's not chill factor. That's just, still air. But I was only down there for the summer. For the summers, I went down 3 times, and the warmest it got there at the geographic South Pole when I was there was minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the warmest it got. And it was an interesting job. And then during the 07 storm, I was a volunteer firefighter at the time. And that third storm, we were real busy with down lines and and arcing transformers and that type of thing till about 8 o'clock at night. And finally at about 8 o'clock at night, the power went out completely. So we had no more of those calls. And we still had a few calls that we were going out on. And we even got trapped once with blown trees behind us and in front of us. So we had to use a chainsaw to cut it out so we could get the truck back. And let's see, about it was probably 2 or 3 in the morning. We got a call from the main station. We were at the Uniontown station, and the main station said all their doors blew in on one side, and 2 of the 3 doors blew out on the other side. And there's the only door that was still working was the one in front of the main engine, so that was kind of lucky. And finally, the 911 system went down sometime in the early morning or very late at night, and so we didn't get any more calls. So I went home. So that's my experience with the weather around here. And like I said, I spent much of my young adult life as a weather observer, both on Mount Washington, New Hampshire, and in Antarctica. So that's my experience.
Well, thank you. So one of the things I remember fondly about the 2007 storm, once we got to Cannon Beach, was how the community pulled together, and everybody, all the restaurants were cooking for the community because their food was going to spoil anyway, and everybody was congregating at the community church, and they had generators, and it just met a lot of people and, that I wouldn't have gotten to know otherwise, and that's a fond memory. So hurricanes have a classification suit as well, based predominantly on the speed of the wind, up to Category 5, which is over 150 mile per hour winds. So next, talking about winter storms can kind of be characterized by a variety of different conditions: heavy snow, freezing rain, high winds. But they're very disruptive to life. They close airports and roads. There can be power outages. Telephone lines and cell towers can be damaged or down. So communications can be disrupted. And that's certainly a big part of why we spend a lot of time working on our communication plans with emergency planning, and have a variety of different radio options. Winter storms get their energy from the kind of collision of 2 different air masses with different temperatures and different moistures. They talk about storm fronts, and there are cold fronts and warm fronts we hear about on watching the weather on the news. And it's sort of like if the cold air is pushing the warm air pocket back, and the cold is winning that battle, then it's called a cold front. If the warm air is moving the cold air away, it's called a cold front. And when they're equally matched, it's called a stationary front. And so winter storms often have a stationary front, and they kind of stay in fairly still in one area for an extended period of time. Usually the cold air comes from the north, moving south out of Canada, dry air, and warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico moves north. And high winds come from a pressure differential from high pressure to low pressure. Just as we talked about with the thunderstorms, the air rises into the colder atmosphere, and moisture condenses, and depends on kind of what the temperatures are at the different levels, how that precipitation will manifest, whether it'll be snow or hail or sleet, what layers it goes through. And this kind of illustrates that. If the it may start out as at that separation line of the air above is freezing, and as it gets warmer, it transitions from snow to sleet to freezing rain and then to rain. So that's kind of the 4 types of low pressure weather systems. And now we'll talk a little bit about the different alerts that we get. And a lot of the information from here forward is I used the kind of emergency, kind of severe weather plan that Rick Hudson put together for the city of Cannon Beach. And it has a lot of this information on it. They talk about advisories versus watches versus storm warnings. The advisory is just kind of be aware, know that the conditions as they occur could lead to a threatening situation, but they're not there yet. A watch indicates that the conditions are favorable, and it's a fair chance that the event will happen, or the event is actually expected in the next few days. And a warning means the conditions are present now, or the event is imminent and you need to take action. Weather alerts can be sent by a number of different authorities, whether it be federal, state, tribal, territorial, or local authorities. Very commonly with severe weather, they come from FEMA or NOAA. And they come by way of something called IPAWS, the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. And this integrated system uses several different avenues. It uses the weather radios, and if you don't have one, it'd be good for everybody to have a radio that gets a battery-operated radio that gets the NOAA weather messages. The emergency alert system, like we've seen tested on TV and radio, and wireless emergency alerts, things that come through our cell phone, almost like Amber Alerts do. So talking about the different alerts for a few different types of events. A flood warning means flooding is imminent or happening now, and you should move immediately to high ground. A watch means, as we said, conditions are favorable, so be prepared. And a flood advisory means things could move in that direction, and just kind of raise your awareness a little bit, keep your antenna up, and be prepared. Remember that rain, it doesn't take a lot of rain to create big problems. We saw that recently on Highway 101 going through Seaside. 6 inches of moving water can knock a person down, and if you're on the beach near a big log, it's even less than that. You could get knocked over and injured. And 2 feet of water can sweep a vehicle away. I found a video that reminded me of it, but I remember going to Universal Studios, and they have when you're on the tram ride, they have a thing where a big flash flood comes through a village and it comes right up against the tram. It's pretty impressive, and if you haven't experienced that, you can find the video online, but it is a good example of what a flash flood would look like. So winds themselves are differentiated into severe winds, damaging winds, very damaging winds, and violent winds, based on how high the wind is. typically associated with thunderstorms when they get up into the damaging and violent range. Heat is something that I think with global warming we're going to be experiencing more of, even here in the cooler northern climes. If it's going to be over 105 for more than 2 days, you really need to take action and do things to stay cool, and always keep your pets in mind as well. Make sure they have water, they have shade. Try to stay out of the heat. Hopefully, unfortunately, many of us here in the Northwest don't have air conditioning, but that might be a good business to go into as we move forward. So the watch means that the heat wave is expected within the next 1 to 3 days, and heat advisory suggests that within the next 12 hours, heat conditions will occur at 100 degrees or higher. Along with wind in cold winter weather, we worry about the wind chill, as Jonathan mentioned. I kind of wondered when you said it, minus 18 was the warmest you got. I was wondering if you went out in short sleeves when it got that warm.
Oh, actually, I was curious about that, and one day when it was 35 below zero and still air, I went out and got some exercise by loading the snow melter, and I took my shirt off, so I had bare skin, and it felt great, but the all the little hairs on my body frosted up, which I thought was interesting. But the sun was so strong and bouncing off the snow that it was actually kind of comfortable, exhilarating.
I remember that living in Minnesota when it would when the sun would come out and it got up to the teens and 20s sometimes, that you go out in your t-shirt and enjoy the warmth of it relative to what you were accustomed to. Anyway, same kind of thing, warnings versus watches versus advisories. Warnings that it's dangerously cold wind chills are expected or occurring right now, versus they are possible, but be prepared, versus just that it's seasonably cold and not extreme, but wind, the cooling of the wind can still be an issue. And then apart from the wind, there are kind of frost or freeze warnings, depending on how cold the temperature is. And, a hard freeze warning is if it's below 28 for an extended period of time, but that can be fairly normal in some parts of the country and the world. So I want to talk a little bit about sheltering. Just talk about the different kinds of shelters that we have in our community. Red Cross shelters are sort of the mainstay of sheltering if we need to evacuate our homes for whatever reason. There are some alternate shelters, and we have something that's considered a specialty shelter here in Cannon Beach. It might even be worth having these locations somewhere if you want to take a screenshot, or this presentation will be available. But knowing where the shelters are is maybe useful information someday. At Coaster Construction, that's considered a specialty shelter, they do have a variety of things stored there. For example, the ability have equipment to help with the sheltering handicapped population. It's above the tsunami line. They have outhouses already on site just for emergency purposes. A lot of water stored, and I haven't talked to them about it, but supposedly preparation for caring for animals too. And if Rick's in the background and wants to add anything to any of this, please feel free. But if we have any kind of an emergency declaration, the first thing that would happen is the Emergency Operations Center would be activated. And I took this right from your handout, and I don't know what the CH stands for after EOC.
That's the EOC at City Hall versus
City Hall.
PW, which would be Public Works.
Okay, thanks. Somebody, for example, the city manager or a designee would notify Clatsop County that there is a citywide emergency, declaring it officially as an emergency. And a communication would be set up between us and the Clatsop County Emergency Operations Center. Primary route of communication would be cell towers, cell phones, satellite phone if necessary, and public safety radio systems. But as I mentioned, we have a number of auxiliary communication radio options. A number of us are ham licensed operators. We have GMRS radios, which are different frequencies, and the Medical Reserve Corps has its own radios that are on a specific frequency that's dedicated to medical use only. So we can communicate, for example, with Seaside Hospital. When necessary, appropriate shelters would be opened, whether it's for temperature-related events, cooling and warming shelters, or if we are displaced from our homes. It says Red Cross shelters priority. I think that just means that the Red Cross shelters would be the first priority to get open.
Yes.
And a number of us are trained in opening Red Cross shelters, or are Red Cross volunteers as well. So, and Janae, who's online with us, is our kind of Red Cross lead in the area. But between city staff, Red Cross volunteers, police department, and the CERT team, we would get the shelters open. Specialty equipment would be deployed as necessary, generators, heaters, etc. And depending on the situation, the Medical Reserve Corps or the Disaster Animal Response Team might be activated. City resources would be deployed as necessary. And for those of us that have been through the FEMA Incident Command Structure training, talks about the different positions, and there are kind of logistic leads, logistics managers, and things like that. So they would work to organize public works and send CERT team where necessary to help with reviewing the infrastructure and working on any repairs like opening roads, things like that. The cache sites would be opened once it was deemed that was necessary. And we would start to communicate with the county and the state to help bring in supplies that are necessary if we don't have them, or to replenish supplies as they get used. And how long these shelters and the emergency remains in effect just depends on what is anticipated. So we're coming down near the end. I just wanted to talk about things to help us all be prepared for severe weather. It makes a big difference to know what to do before, and talk about with your family and with emergency operation folks what to do before, during, and after severe weather. If you talk about it, then you'll have a plan and be prepared. Make a communication plan with your family before the severe weather hits, so that if you're separated, you know how you're going to get in touch, or kind of know who outside the area you'll communicate with, so that If you can't reach each other, you'll know that you're safe or what kind of help you need. Lots of different emergency supplies, but you should have them at home, at work, and in your car. And be prepared for being without power for an extended period of time. So have a way to keep warm, blankets, should have light and batteries to, and bottled water and non-perishable food. Battery operated radio, that, as I mentioned, so you can listen to emergency announcements and the NOAA weather announcements. And it is recommended that we all on the coast especially keep our gas tanks at least half full, because if there is a severe event, the gas stations may not be available, and you don't want to be stuck somewhere. If, for example, I think about the people on the highway in Virginia recently that were stuck in their cars in snowy weather for some of them 27 hours, I heard. And if you're using your car's heater to keep warm and have your engine running, you don't want to run out of gas any sooner than necessary. And it certainly would have made a difference to have blankets in the car there as well. Always remember to include your pets in your emergency plans, and I do have handouts on how to build a go bag for your pets if anybody wants one. Always good to think of others and check on your neighbors to make sure they're okay, and even discuss kind of communication plans and evacuation plans with them. Insurance, I think, is important. We talked about flooding a little bit, and flood insurance. If you think you're in an area that may be in a floodplain, especially, it takes, once you get a policy, it takes 30 days for it to take effect. So don't think about that just when the flood warning comes. Listen to your official announcements, radio, TV, emergency alerts. Do follow the advice of the local authorities if they recommend evacuation. And I like the saying, turn around, don't drown. So don't think you can walk or drive through flooded streets. Better not to take a chance. And I think the last thing is, if you haven't done so, it's really valuable to sign up for these different emergency alert notification systems. Cannon Beach Police Department has their own system where they send out announcements via text messaging, sometimes phone calls or landline calls. It's called the Nixel system, and if you live elsewhere, you can go to the main Nixel page and put in your zip code, and you'll be able to sign up for your community. Clatsop County has similar alerts that it's very easy to sign up for all of these. And then Rick has a community notification list, an emailing list, and he sends out emergency announcement and community information on a regular basis. So that's really all I have to say about severe weather, and I'd love to open things up to any discussion or comments.
Hey, Bob, this is Rick. Really well done. Fantastic. You can put together a presentation better than anybody I've ever known. Really, really well done. A couple of things I want to add, just to emphasize people get very comfortable and normalized when it comes to weather. They are fairly predictable events. And it's just important that people take the next step of normalizing these type of emergencies and keep that preparation level up. Be very comfortable with what a warning, a watch, and an advisory is. We noticed on the most recent small tsunami that came in is people didn't understand the difference between the watch and the warning, and they are a significant difference to an area. So they make a difference to know that. And that's why we keep putting out the information consistently as possible. With that being said, some of the localized things that will create these problems with the severe weather. When you do localized versus regionalized, that's one thing that's going to make a difference when it comes to sheltering. The localized events of flooding, landslides, or tornadoes usually affect a small area, and it could be catastrophic to that small area. So there'll be a lot of support around that. The real challenge is when you get into a regionalized event like a tsunami damage or an earthquake event, but that's not really weather. That's something different. And I think it's important for people to be ready for both those things, and your presentation definitely hit on those. And then the importance of shelters. Shelters, don't consider the cache sites really good shelters. They're not the best location for a shelter. Really, the shelters that we've identified, and even our homes, if we can reoccupy them, that's really the best shelters, especially for animals and for people who really need to have some good cover. That's the best locations. So as we build cache sites and we have our supplies built up, realize some of the best shelters we have are our own homes, and where they are located. And but then also localized areas can be vulnerable to the landslides, and flooding. And Bob, great job today. This is really well done. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, certainly talking about having your home as the first choice for a shelter if we can reoccupy our homes, but that's where groups like the CERT teams will be valuable in assessing the infrastructure and helping with deciding whether it's safe to re-enter our homes during some events, like after an earthquake. Let's see. Looking at the chat section, Mary Beth said something about the Coriolis effect, I think, and maybe you can speak up, Mary Beth, and tell us what you were referring to, because I don't remember what part of the talk.
That's the right-hand swirl or the left-hand swirl.
Oh, okay. Good. So yes, you think it is true for the direction of the tornado spin as well. Yeah, I would think so.
I believe so. And it's not 100%. Just like when you're watching water go down the drain, there are things that can affect it and turn it the other way, but it's the majority are.
Yeah. And I think it's even fascinating to learn that mollusk shells that are spiral, like snail shells and conchs, also spiral the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere as they do in the northern hemisphere.
It is pretty cool. Nancy has a question.
Nancy, I'd like to answer that question if you don't mind. Was that directed at me or to somebody else?
Probably at Rick.
Okay.
At you.
The CAL system is not only used for distant tsunamis, but that's really what it was designed for. So in the early 90s, when that system was offered to the Cannon Beach Rural Fire Protection District to install, it was really before the internet, and it was really way before the iPOS system existed. And so the likelihood of people having a distant event and not having awareness that a distant event was coming is really why the alarm systems on the coast are so important, or were established and being really important at the time. The lack of modern technology in the CAL system makes it to where it is a little bit specifically used for distant events, and the local notification really is the feeling of the earthquake. And because this is a manual system at this time, you're not always going to have someone in the fire station to push that button. And so if it happened at 3 o'clock in the morning and there was nobody there and we had an earthquake here, there would be no sirens that would go off. So the expectation is that for a local event, the sirens are not specifically used for that. The interesting thing about the CAL system and what it can be used for is really the citywide PA, though. There's so many things that can happen, even giving people an all clear verbally on the PA system to tell them that they can reoccupy their homes and leave the assembly areas. Even something like that is real important to use the system in that way. So it's not just a beach evacuation system, but it is primarily designed for a distant event. Our goals are, of course, to upgrade that to where we can use them in these smaller event types to give better information safely.
Yeah.
Another question, follow up on that. Since there was some difficulty getting the PA system to work, has that been figured out, or the bugs worked out so that next time it won't set the alarm if all you're trying to do is send out a message?
What we have not done yet is dive back into the system, and that's really the fire department's objective to do this. They have not gone back there to mess with that. They're kind of reeling back a little bit, like, okay, there is ways to operate the PA system, and it is a manual that they're reading to do that, but they have not tested it yet. They have not gone back and tested the PA system to see if they can do it without alerting it. What we are waiting for, and this is what the fire department tells me, is they have a gentleman coming that was already en route to test the system in the first part of February. That was already actually in the plans, and he would come through and test the whole system and find out exactly what the needs are. And they were going to talk to him at that time to find out what's the best way to use the system in that fashion. So I think they're kind of waiting for that individual to come here and kind of tell us a little bit more about it, educate them a little tiny bit more about it. And that should help us out, and that should really give us some good information to figure out where we go next.
One more thing, and then I'll get off. Just kind of an FYI, we live at the very south end of Tolovana, and we typically cannot hear the cow alarm unless we happen to be outside at that moment.
The cow, from what I hear, the actual testing is at a different volume than the alarms themselves and the PA themselves. Were you able to hear the PA that day?
You mean the alert?
Yes.
Yes, but not. It was fairly quiet, and I had the windows open. But I did hear it.
You heard the alarm and then the follow-up PA?
No, I didn't hear any follow-up.
Okay, so you just heard the alarm. And the one thing that the fire department members told me, who are responsible for maintaining that system and the ones who operated it that day, they said the last time they actually tried to do a PA announcement was 10 years ago when they switched out the motherboards from analog to digital. They actually did that throughout the city to see if it could be heard throughout the city, and it was pretty effective. That's going to need to be done again so we can make sure that everybody can hear these announcements. And that's really part of the upgrade of that system. Is what good is it if nobody in certain spots can hear it? And so we need to look at that closely and run through those trainings on safe days and notify people when we're going to do it, so it's well organized. And we need to take the time to go through that system correctly. But you're right. There were people, I had people call me throughout this process saying that they heard the sirens, but they only heard mumbling of the announcement and they were confused. And we need to make sure that we fix that.
Okay.
I would add to that I couldn't hear the announcement from inside the house. I could hear the siren, and I always go outside to hear what the announcement is, even when it's the cows, just to make sure that it's coming, that's what's there. And I live close enough to the fire station that if they were yelling it from the rooftop, I would hear it about the same volume.
Yeah.
So, Rick, thank you for the addition. Jonathan, there have been a couple of thanks on the comments for your the additional information that you shared with us. Thank you very much. Len asked about the active shooter presentation that was done not too long ago. Yes, it was recorded, and it is posted, I think, on YouTube, but it is available on the emergency management page of the city's website. So I've just got the website open next to me, and I'm trying to find, it's in the under emergency management. There's a training section, and I can't find the link for that exactly right now. Let's see. Anyway, I'm sure you'll be able to find it if you go to do you know how to get to the city's website? If not, it is ci.cannon-beach.or.us. and then look for a link to emergency management. And then somewhere navigating through there is a link for training, I believe, that will take you to all the kind of videos that we have for those things. Rick, I don't know if you or Lila can find it easily. There it is, training materials. Under down on the right, it says emergency management, and then you go down and it says resource library, and then at the bottom of the pull down for resource library says training materials, and then there are links to all the different both the training videos or training events that we've had for the city, and also some other interesting videos on earthquakes, looks like super volcanoes of the Pacific Northwest, and video on the last big Cascadia event. So lots of interesting things and training information. Oh, there it is. Rick posted a link on the chat. And Mary Beth did too. Thanks. Mary Beth won. She got it there.
She's fast. She's quick.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate everybody being here, and hope everybody learned at least a little bit of something. Thanks. Enjoy this amazing weather we're having. Got to appreciate it while we have it, because it's going to change back to cold and wet before too long. So have a great weekend. Bye.